It's almost time for Halloween, so let's build ourselves a Thor's hammer. To make the hammer, I'm basically making a box out of 1/2-inch plywood. This is for the faces of the hammer, so it's gonna measure 5 1/4 by 8 inches. And of course there are 4 faces to make the hammer. I'm gonna set my blade to 22.5 degrees. Now, I'm gonna set my fence to 5 inches. Once I have my width cut, it's gonna be 5 1/4 inches, accounting for the angle. The hammer is an octagon, and to connect the faces together, I'm having these 1-inch strips, also cut at a 22.5 degree bevel on either side. I'm gonna be needing a lot of these strips for the sides as well as the top. So I'm gonna be ripping these on the table saw, and I'm gonna make decent sized strips. It's time to do my cuts at the miter saw, so I get faces that measure 5 by 8 inches. To create the hammer, I'm gonna need 4 of these faces and 4 of these corner posts. They are both cut at 22.5 degrees angles, and together that makes a 45 degree angle. And now I'm gonna cut this to 8 inches. When I had all the pieces cut up for the basic box, it was time to glue them together. I used a hot glue gun, which sets up really fast, so you have to work quickly. Next, I drilled a hole with a 1 1/8 inch bit in one of the faces to make room for the handle. Once that was cut, I could complete gluing the box. For the sides of the hammer, I'm going to be using pieces cut at the same 22.5 degrees, and I'm going to cut them to length to fit on the main box here. So everything lines up. So the trick to this is setting up your miter saw properly, because you're dealing with several angles here. Not only are you dealing with a 22.5 degree angle here, you're also dealing with the angles here, which are 11 1/4 degrees, which is a compound miter cut. So let me show you how I set up my miter saw. So I'm going to set my miter at 11 1/4 degrees. And I'm going to set my bevel at 22.5 degree angle. First, I need to get my angles right, so I'm turning this upside down and I'm cutting it anywhere at the end. Now when that is cut, I can measure out where I need to do my cut to make it fit. Now it's useful to have a bevel so that you can set the angle of your cut. That way you can turn it around and mark out the cut here too. Obviously the side you're marking is the side you're gonna cut. Next, I need the corner pieces, which is the same cut, it's just smaller pieces. To make my next cut, I need to start over, making a clean cut at the end. So I'm turning so the bevel side is down, and I cut anywhere. Again, I did my fresh cut, and next I need to measure where I need to make my other cut. Again, I'm gonna use my bevel, and this is really just to clarify for yourself, so you don't get confused which cut it is you need to make. Now these pieces will connect like this, so I need 8 of these and 8 of these to complete the hammer. Now it's time to glue the face parts together. I actually tried on a previous model to nail this in with brad nailers and regular glue, and it was much harder to get it to stick on properly, so I highly recommend hot glue gun. It's very practical. Of course, this kind of cheap plywood chips easily, but it really doesn't matter for this kind of project. I already reinforced the inside with yellow carpenter's glue, and I might reinforce the inside here as well, just to give it a little extra strength. Remember, you also have the handle to deal with here, so make sure you don't close it up on both sides before you have taken care of that. To make the handle, I'm using a draw knife and a 2x4 that I cut in half, but you can use a dowel. You can sand it, use whatever you want just to get it round. Trying to get it to 1 1/8 inch in diameter. In order to make a real hammer where the handle is more secure, I first drilled a 1 1/8 inch hole into the hammer. That's the size of my round handle here. Next, I'm gonna take this 2x4, cut it in half. Make the same size hole in here, so I can put this inside the hammer and cap this. And I will screw and glue this in, and it will cap the handle, making it strong enough to use. Now I'm just thinking about how long I want this handle, something like that. I'm going to secure this with a screw now on either side. Make sure you go through the long grain and not the end grain. or else it will split on you. I'm just using gold screws to put it in. You can use drywall screws, it doesn't matter what you use. To secure the handle on here and act as a clamp for the glue, I'm gonna pre-drill and countersink a screw. Okay, so the handle is clamped down, glued in, and it's very strong. Now with this step down, I can finish gluing my other parts. To create the end caps for the hammer, I measured the sides. This is 6 by 6 inches. I needed something that was a 45-degree angle to match here, and that's because these pieces are 22.5 and 22.5 angles together on each side. That equals 45 degrees. That's the angle I needed here in order to make this flush. So I set my fence to 5.5 inches. With this angle, that creates a 6-inch length. I cut these angles on all the sides as well as in the corners to get it all to fit in here. Now let's glue it together. I want this to be as smooth as possible to make it look like metal, so I'm gonna spackle in any imperfections. For a top cap, I cut out a piece of plywood that measures roughly 5 and 3.25 inch in width here, and it's oval. And I cut it out on the bandsaw, but it's easy to do on the jigsaw. And this is just to cap it off here. I'm gonna attach it with hot glue. All this needs is some sanding and some painting. I first applied a primer and then 2 coats of metallic oil paint. You could also use spray paint, but I had a regular can on hand. The next day it was time to add the decorative elements on the sides. First I mixed some black and metallic paint, which I applied on the sides and a little all over to give it a bit more of a forged look. Then I added some decorative scrolls on the ends to replicate the Thor hammer and give it that signature look. Finally, the handle. To replicate leather, I picked up some pleather and cut it in strips. With a hot glue gun, I attached it to the handle and also added a hanger on the end. And there we have it. The hammer is complete. Well, not even Thor built his own hammer. This was a really fun build. It's a real hammer made out of wood, so you don't have to worry about it breaking when you go to that party. Actually, I made another one just to play around with, so maybe we should test it out and see how strong it is. Well, I would say it broke a pumpkin. The handle stayed good. Now, if I just reinforce those faces. I hope you guys have a great Halloween. If this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. See you soon. Thanks for watching. I feel like Carol Burnett. Mjölnir!